I had one sister. I had two sisters. One sister who died at 3 years old from malpractice, really. If in those days there would have been a lawsuit. But in those days, Negroes were not given the best medical treatment. It was hard to come by in those days. It was before Howard University Freedmen's Hospital really came into its own. And that's one thing, we really did not get the best health treatment. There was some, to be sure, and Negro doctors began to come up, and a lot of them came from Dunbar High School, actually. Mm-hmm. Charlie Drew, Dr. Drew, the plasma, and blood plasma finder, and a lot of others, but health care was poor, and so my mother lost her daughter at 3, and so I came up with my other sister, who was about 6 years older than I, went to Dunbar High School, went to Howard University, and was an English teacher in the public school system before she did other work in the government and later on in life.
What kind of kid were you? Were you quiet? Were you mischievous? Were you?
I was never a quiet kid. I was yes, I guess mischievous, but I never gave my mother and father much trouble. When I look back upon it, when I compared it with today's children, I never broke a window. I was never put in jail, never arrested, never in my life. I was not a good student. I did what I had to do to get by. I was interested in girls and having fun and living the good life. And I really didn't come into my own until much later in life. I think when I went to the Army, the war was a maturing experience for me. And it was there that I became much more social conscious than I was as a youngster. I won't say I fretted away. I learned a lot because I was exposed to a lot. As I said, I was exposed to these wonderful teachers at Dunbar High School. And I didn't have the academic record, and I wasn't an athlete. I didn't weigh but 120-some pounds, so I certainly couldn't play football and get a scholarship to any school. So when I went to Howard University, I was exposed again to wonderful teachers and men like Charlie Wesley and Mordecai Johnson and Rayford Logan and Alan Locke and Sterling Brown, just wonderful teachers, and they were inspirational and whatnot. But you see, I was headed toward medicine because in those days, everybody wanted to be a doctor. And you wanted to be a doctor mostly for the wrong reasons, because the doctors made all the money and they always had the prettiest girls and they married the prettiest girls, and every mother wanted her daughter to marry a doctor. So I was headed in the wrong direction, and I had no real affinity for the sciences, for math and calculus and zoology and etc.
Was that because your parents wanted you to do that?
No, they didn't press it upon me. My father never pressed upon me to even be a lawyer. I came into that when I was in the Army, when I was actually doing court-martial work. That's how I eventually got into law. But in those days, I was going to be a doctor. I just knew I was going to be a brain surgeon, even knew my specialty early on in life. But then I flunked a course in chemistry at Howard University. Didn't even turn in my papers. Missed the labs more often than I attended them. I was elected president of my fraternity, Beta chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. My father had given me a car, so I had an automobile, so I two-fisted a car. Head of a fraternity chapter, all the things that go with it. And I just had not matured, had not grown, and as I look back, as I perhaps should have at that time. Didn't have any aspirations about going into politics because we didn't vote in Washington in those days. We didn't have even a city council or mayor or a delegate like Eleanor Holmes or anything like that. In those days, we were governed by a commissioner appointed by the President of the United States. So we didn't vote. My father and my mother went back to Virginia to vote, but I didn't know. I never voted until after the war when I went to Boston.
Did you not see the kind of home life that you came from, and the fact that your father, was a lawyer, he worked for the government, etc. Did you not see that as being very exceptional? That this was not the average life of a black person in the United States?
I didn't see it as being exceptional because I wasn't exposed to that which was not exceptional.
So
I didn't know what it was. I had no basis for comparison. Within the community in which I lived, there were many doctors coming up. There were professionals coming. There were preachers who were always there and who demanded a certain respect within the community. There were doctors who were above the preachers. I mean, because they had money. I presume it was money which was the basis for it. And there were teachers in education, and there were governmental workers. And then there were people who worked outside in rich people's homes. We knew about that. But women had no rights in those days. And most women did not work outside the home. I remember my mother saying one day, he put her out to work, meaning that another family, the wife had gone out to work. But that was sort of a disgraceful thing to do in those days because women just didn't do that. The man was the head of the household and the woman stayed home and she did. But with this strong public school system, you began to get a lot of teachers, and professors at Howard University. And so that was part of the cocoon in which I lived.